Hello, and welcome back for another episode of the Toasted Tale podcast with me, Jim. I'm really happy you've decided to spend your time with me today around the fireside. If you like enjoying hearing stories, like me, then you've come to the right place. I think there are interesting tales in every subject, and they're just waiting to be found and shared. In this podcast, we're going to take a random subject and use it as a seed to do some research for 1 short hour, and in that time I'll do my best to find a story that we can both enjoy. So let's bring in the Wheel of Fortune style spinner and find out what today's subject will be. Right, so today it's landed on George Quasha. With the brief description I get from the topic randomizer, I can see that George is an artist. I have not previously, however, seen any of his work, or for that fact, the type of art he creates. I'm just a guy who enjoys finding interesting stories, and along the way, learning a thing or two. So as not to keep you all waiting, I've already completed the 1 hour's research, where I have looked for stories and the life of George Quasha. And what I found, I'm really excited to share. So let's get straight into it. George Quasha, born in 1942, is an American artist and poet who works across media, exploring language, sculpture, drawing, video art, sound, and music. And while we're definitely going to go into George's art style and the sort of pieces he creates, I want to first look into art itself. Art's one of those things that can mean different things to many people. One thing that may emotionally speak to one person on one level may appear dull and boring to others. It can be anything. It can be paintings, it can be music, it can be stories. Art is all around us. You can see art in nature. You can see it in man-made architecture and buildings. Whatever speaks to you, whatever you can put into the world using your creativity, can be classed as artistic expression. Now, art can do many things as well. It can reflect society and be a response to what came before. As I said, it can also be an expression, a way of making a statement about what art is in comparison to what art was. This can be seen in the way sometimes you can look at modern art and it can be confusing. You can look at Warhol, Rothko and Pollock and go, I could do something like that. Even my toddler could do something like that. But oftentimes there's the fine details in these modern pieces which we wouldn't be able to put in ourselves, that only an artist's eye could do. And also, the whole point of the modern style of art could be seen as a rejection of historical artistic techniques and conservative values, such as depicting realistic subjects with a greater proclivity to using abstract or experimental artistic techniques and processes. Art can be confusing and strange, but that's the whole point. You don't want, in like some kind of stuffy business setting, someone to be kind of artistic and strange. You kind of want them to do a job, but the whole point of art is to maybe ask something different, to reflect a different side of humanity and the world. And that's why it can be found everywhere, and that's why it's important. In the hour's research I gave myself for this podcast, I looked at George Quasha's work. And some of the things he did were really fascinating and really kind of interesting to look at. As I said, he does a wide range of art, but there are some specific things that, themes you could say, that he focuses his work around, and I'd like to discuss a few of those today. There's something called an axial style, which is something that George regularly comes back to in his work. And he does something called axial stones, axial drawings, and axial videos, among others, all of which I think would be worth mentioning today. Starting with the axial stones. These are sculptures where multiple rocks of varying shapes and sizes are balanced upon one another. And these are quite big. These are like almost melon in size, kind of big melon in size, but kind of very odd shapes, And they are balanced in the most precarious points, so a singular point between these two rocks, and George Quasha, he finds the kind of the point where they just balance on themselves, and then that is the art. And what you get when he's able to find these balancing points is an impossible looking structure, which finds kind of a happy improbability of balance on a proverbial knife's edge. And it really makes for some quite striking pieces. I don't know how good they'd be to transport and get them in if you were to buy one, but I don't think that's the point. Now, I know that art is subjective, and so I can only give how it made me feel when looking at this, but I couldn't help but appreciate the precarious calm that I felt when looking at a lot of these stones. With almost the weight of the world from the top stone weighing upon the lower one, it made me feel about how sometimes in life, stressful situations can feel like they're holding on by a thread. But while you can hold on, and sometimes, especially when you've got that extra pressure, amazing things can emerge. Now, you may be able to accuse me of looking too far into it, but I really enjoyed looking at them. They were striking, and I would recommend you taking a look as well. For the axial drawings that he completes, these pieces of work involve using a quite interesting technique for his drawings. They involve the practice of drawing from the lower centre of the body, rather than from the arm or wrist, in virtually all of the work that he's done since 2006. It also involves drawing with two hands simultaneously, where each of the hands is part of the core movement, yet is an independent expression of that movement. And what he's able to create in these axial drawings are some really amazing, almost minimalist artwork, with very few swirling, swooshing lines. Muted colour, like dark greys or kind of a dark red maybe. And it's really quite beautiful. It allows your brain to recognise the patterns in the work and come to its own conclusion about the story the artist is trying to tell. The third part of the Axial series that I'd like to look at was his Axial videos that George did. In these, he would take simple movements, like someone saying a phrase, or a movement of the hands, and then he'd slow the movement down, incrementally, through the video, until you could see every barely perceptible movement in the grand scheme of the action the artist was focusing on. And so you kind of get this very strange experience where you see maybe a hand movement, maybe two hands moving together, and then it slows down, and then it becomes really slow, and you see the tiny movements that create the whole movement that, at full speed, our eyes wouldn't be able to fully appreciate. But by slowing it down in these videos, he's able to show detail a lot better. Now, it was a bit weird to see these at first, a bit weird to kind of see maybe someone's face really close up saying one word over and over again, but it did make me appreciate the very small, tiny details that go into most of the normal things we take for granted, which I enjoyed. And so for the axial works that George Quasha does, I would recommend some of the bits can be, they kind of range in strangeness, but most good art is a bit different. Challenges the senses is maybe a good way of putting it. Poetry also makes up a large portion of George's work. His view of poetry is, quote, the core awareness, the matrix of view that hones the most essential life principle, end quote. And we can see that in the wide amount of work that he does. One of his major projects surrounding poetry was one called Art Is, Speaking Portraits, where he recorded over 800 artists, poets and composers from 11 countries and in 21 languages, recording video footage of them, explaining what they themselves felt art, music and poetry is, in their own words. And I can't really think of a better resource, maybe, than for someone who was wanting a immersive experience of what these artistic pursuits were to the people doing them than would be to watch one of these videos where you just go through a number of these very short kind of interviews, like Vox Pop style, getting all those insights from those people who are artistic professionals and live and work within these circles. In 2006, George was awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship in Video Art, and he's had installations for his work in many major cities and shows. And one of the positive things that I was thinking while looking through his work was that if you've got a voice or something you want to say, something to express, then the art world's kind of got a space for you. If you can hone your skills into something which makes people think about themselves, about the world around them, about society, then maybe you are something the art world needs. And I thought that was good. Especially as the art world, from maybe the outside point of view, may seem a bit exclusive and difficult to gain entry to. If you've got something that's good enough, then the people will come. Thank you for spending your time with me today around the fireside, and giving me the opportunity to learn a bit about George Quasha. I found his artistic style fascinating. It's opened my eyes to what can be considered art and what is artistic, and it's made me really think about the possibilities that can be found in nature and in life, and by using different techniques and styles through your art to produce certain results. If you enjoy listening to me find out about these random subjects and picking out stories within, then liking the podcast can go a long way to supporting the show. This will allow other people to see it, and hopefully allow more people to join us around the fireside next time. If you'd like to join me again for another story around the fire, then I'll be back here every Tuesday and Thursday. Your company will of course always be greatly welcomed. I hope you all have a lovely rest of day, and I'll speak to you again soon for another toasted tale by the fireside.